So, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Charlotte von Stattingen, the founding director of Zurich Art Weekend, and it's my pleasure to have you today to close this series of the art and science talks that we created this weekend. These art and science talks were conceived in 2018, inviting leading artists, researchers, scientists at the forefront of their respective fields to have out-of-the-box discussion and share perspectives. For this afternoon event, I'm honored to have here with me on stage Olivier Zeitoun, Associate Curator of the Centre Pompidou, and Agnieszka Kurant. To introduce quickly the speakers, Olivier Zeitoun has co-curated, among others, the exhibitions La Fabrique du Vivant in 2018, World of Networks in 2022 at the Centre Pompidou, and co-edited the accompanying catalogs. A graduate of philosophy, art history and social science, Olivier has authored articles and numerous essays on issues related to digital fields in art and design. He also pursues teaching and activities as an independent curator. His research focuses mainly on issues related to the digital field in art and design through cross-disciplinary approaches. Agnieszka Kurant, he's a conceptual artist and the recipient of the 2020 LACMA A+T Award, the 2019 Frontier Art Prize of the Pollock Grasner Grant Award, and in 2022 the Google Emmy Award. Her exhibitions and solo shows include the Mudam, which she opened actually yesterday, and we are so lucky to have her with us today. At Castello di Rivoli in 22-23, and a commission for the facade of the Guggenheim Museum in New York, as well as solo shows at the Hannover Kunstverein, the Sculpture Center, and she represented the Polish Pavilion at the 12th Venice Biennale of Architecture. So I wish you a great talk, and pass on the word to Olivier. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Thank you very much, Zurich Art Weekend, for the organization, and Georgia Hall for the amazing job. Thank you, Agnieszka, for accepting my invitation to this talk. It's a great pleasure to be here with you tonight. So just this afternoon, sorry. So just a brief overview of the talk that we will have this afternoon. I will make a short introduction before you go into the various aspects of your research and practice related to science, of course, and we'll then open the Q&A together with the public. So just a quick words, Agnieszka, you are an artist based in New York. You were born in 1978 in Poland, in Łódź. Your artistic practice has evolved at the intersection since 2007 of very various disciplines, blending together art, science, and philosophy. That's what we're going to see this afternoon. As an experimental and a conceptual artist, Agnieszka, and at the core of your practice is the notion of collective intelligence and its emergent forms and their related notions that will be also discussed this afternoon, such as collective persons, distributive cognition, or superorganisms. Some things that have been raised in the previous talk when we were talking about common experiences that could be shared. So in order to create your installations, films, sculptures, or painting, you've led many collaborations with different scientists, economists, sociologists, anthropologists, neuroscientists, and in some ways we can say that you're one of the very few artists who can claim having collaborated to create your artworks with both neuroscientists and also termites or trees. And we can say that this is quite unique, and we're gonna see why. This is also how I got to discover your work 4 years ago when we met on the occasions of Worlds of Networks exhibition I was working on at the Centre Pompidou, and I was doing this research more specifically on networks and the living, and we'll see how they are definitely interrelated. And it's no surprise that your artworks have a great deal to do with networks in some ways. These artworks are often generated, evolutive, connected, being subject to emergent behavior by other than human entities or behaviors. And so I'd like to qualify your practice in a way as, in itself, as a wide network that could illuminate multiple flip sides of the same questions, what we think usually as the same questions, and showing how they are often completely interconnected. And collective intelligence, for instance, is crucial in your work in the way that it's totally linked with nowadays ambitions of digital capitalism to extract values, to control and to make use of collective social behaviors and labor force. So I've always felt your work aim at presenting the plasticity of these networks, how they can express a collective trauma, a sudden collective change, notions of faith, risk, a future that we will talk about this afternoon, and how they can all crystallize in the networks we are now living in. And we'll have the chance to discover also the new pieces you've created for the exhibition at the Mudam that literally opened 2 days ago at Mudam, so in Luxembourg. So we are very happy to listen to you, and the floor is yours, Agnieszka.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Zurich Art Weekend, especially Charlotte, and thank you, Olivier, for this invitation. I am going to start by presenting some reference images of phenomena that have inspired my work. So I'm going to start by explaining a couple of words about what is collective intelligence, because that's the phenomenon that has inspired most of my practice of the past 10 years. What you see behind me is an image of an organism that has really inspired me. This organism is named slime mold, and it's an organism that consists of single cells that live separately on a forest floor, but when they are faced with danger or lack of water or lack of nutrients, these single cells form one body in these bright colors. These are real colors of these organisms, and they start moving as this super organism and thinking collectively and acting collectively, despite the fact that this organism has no brain and no nervous system. So I was fascinated with how this is possible that an intelligent behavior can emerge in such simple forms of life. And so this organism is not only able to move collectively, but also to solve a labyrinth, a maze. So it has been co-opted for computation, and it's considered as kind of a different, alternative, unconventional way of computing. So this organism is an example of collective intelligence. Collective intelligence is a phenomenon that happens in various complex systems. The systems can be a colony of bacteria, a colony of termites, but also neurons in a human brain, or citizens in society, or different phenomena happening on the internet, but also, for example, the stock market or traffic. These are systems where there are millions of elements, whether molecules or bacteria, animals, or human citizens, and out of their interactions, there emerge new forms which are most often unpredictable, uncomputable, and what I found most interesting about these processes is that we're living in times where everything starts to seem to be computable, especially with artificial intelligence. And yet we're surrounded by millions of these phenomena that are completely uncomputable. This includes also weather phenomena that are products of a complex systems, such as a climate, and of course financial crisis or revolutions or development of social movements. So I started exploring this phenomenon named collective intelligence, because it's really interesting to think about how forms can emerge in this unpredictable way in times where we think that everything is controlled and predictable and our lives seem to just be executing a program. So actually it's not true. So I started studying a lot of examples of collective intelligence in nature, in society, and how contemporary technologies are also using these phenomena. And most of my work is around questions of future of intelligence, future of creativity, and future of labor. And as you're going to see in my future slides, a lot of them are related to how the use of digital technologies has allowed to use collective intelligence to produce, for example, artificial intelligence. So let me present a couple of more examples of collective intelligence in nature. So these are colonies of bacteria that perform something called quorum sensing, which in other words, is collective decision making. So a colony of bacteria makes a decision about, for example, moving somewhere else or even killing off part of the colony for the benefit of the whole group. And these processes are, in a way, also manifesting in a physical form of how this colony is evolving. And one of the scientists that was studying this was Eshel Ben-Yaakov, who looked at these different forms and how the group think, this collective intelligence changes shape as different collective decisions are made. They are made through the exchange of chemical signals. And so, as you can see, these are very simple organisms, and they are capable of making very complex collective decisions. Perhaps, I would argue, they are better at collective decisions than many of our contemporary societies. Another example that I'm sure many of you recognize, murmuration. So this is an example of how flocks of birds form as a sort of a single body. And one of the reasons for it is that they are starting to look like a big organism, and they seem dangerous or inaccessible to predators. So that's one of the reasons why these forms are emerging in the sky. And the popular belief is that there is one bird that is leading. But actually, the way that these phenomena form is that each bird is only looking at its immediate neighbors. So each bird has like 4 or 6 neighbors. It's only reacting to what they are doing. And the general behavior emerges out of this collectivity. So there is no leading, guiding hand, no master bird, no queen of bees or ants. These are figures of speech. There's no such a thing in terms of somebody giving orders. These are phenomena that are emergent. Another example of collective intelligence that is kind of getting us closer to contemporary technologies such as the internet, this is the Wood Wide Web, as it was named. This is a collective intelligence of connecting trees in a forest. So roots of different trees are connected and are, in a way, talking to each other through the symbiosis of the roots with the fungi present in the soil. And trees within a forest are able to exchange signals and transmit messages on even very long distances about, for example, a drought, a fire, or a lack of nutrients in the soil. Of course, this is an internet that is extremely slow. It takes sometimes months or even years to transmit a message. But it operates like a form of as it was named, a Wood Wide Web. Another example is fireflies. Fireflies are flashing, as you know, but they are capable of synchronizing in such a way that male fireflies during the mating period are flashing in unison. So this means they flash at exactly same time, but again, nobody's giving orders. They are just syncing by observing their immediate neighbors. And scientists are now trying to mimic these complex processes, but it's actually very difficult. Another example of collective intelligence, but in this case, also a symbiosis. So this are lichens, which are a symbiosis between algae and fungi, and again, like very complex collective intelligence on a forest floor. Here it's a little bit more complex example of a collective intelligence, where the bobtail squid is taking advantage of the bacteria present under its skin. These bacteria are producing light. They are fluorescent, and this light allows the squid to eliminate its shadow. So predators don't see its shadow, and it becomes less available for as prey. So it's a kind of the use of this collective intelligence of one species by another species. And of course, squid and octopus have the chromatophores in their skin, which I'm sure all you know about, these little patches of that create various patterns and form a kind of language, visual language, of course, not literally, but that are various patterns that appear on the octopus skin that are connected to various things happening within the octopus body and its relationship with the environment. And there are also emergent phenomena that emerge out of all these chromatophores, all these cells in the skin. Another example of a little bit more complex phenomenon that inspired my work related to collective intelligence. This is an example of a planimal, Elysia chlorotica. It's an animal that is capable of photosynthesis. So an evolution of this organism of over millions of years led to this kind of hybridity that these are animals, and yet they are photosynthesizing. So today, a lot of scientists investigating energy and the future of energy are looking at organisms like that and their behavior. Another example of collective, plural subjectivity is a choral chimera, where two organisms are able to form a collective hybrid cognition and behavior, as you can see, two different forms. There are many examples of some phenomenon called weird life, which are organisms that are described as extremophiles, so organisms living in very difficult adverse conditions where the acidity of the water, for example, is such that it can be compared to an interior of a lithium battery. So there are organisms that can live in such conditions, and they collectively produce very interesting forms. These are, for example, microbial towers that are emerging from different organisms and sediments that are present in the ocean, and they resemble this kind of structures like a city. Or I'm also inspired in a collective intelligence phenomena in geology, and this is, for example, the Giant's Causeway, which is a result of a complex phenomenon of emergence and collective intelligence, where molecules of lava froze in a particular way to create this almost like a datascape or cityscape that is extremely regular. And this is a geological example of another example of this kind of emergence and collective intelligence looking at molecules and minerals is the evolution of minerals. So it's a relatively new phenomenon that has been studied, that actually minerals co-evolve with life. And we always thought about them as somehow static, but no, they also actually evolve. And of course, human impact on geology and how we collectively as a humanity have create carbon footprints and other imprints. So this is, for example, trinitite, a geological formation which is the result of the atomic tests in New Mexico and other places where the sand forms this quasi-geological form that resembles glass. And of course, plastiglomerate, plastitar, other examples of how plastics are merging with tar and with stone at the bottom of the oceans and create this kind of human, artificial, natural formations. But I'm also looking at chemical and physical reactions, and this, for example, are close-ups of what happens inside liquid crystals and their reactions. Liquid crystals, I'm sure you're familiar with the term, they are in our LCD screens, and I got interested in them because alchemists and early scientists, they were looking at molecules of liquid crystals under the microscope, and that's what they saw. And they were convinced that they are forms of life. But actually, liquid crystals are a non-organic form of matter that simply constantly changes. It reacts to changes in temperature or electrical charge, and it takes forms that really look like life. So scientists and philosophers have been looking at this phenomena and tried to create artificial life, and whether through building systems or automata throughout the past at least 400 years, but since antiquity. So these are some examples of automata that were built, like the Vaucanson's duck, that was an automatic duck or artificial swan, or more recent, Claude Shannon that created the Theseus maze with a mouse. That was the first example of, well, an animal that was artificially animated, like with a computer program, and also the beginning of machine learning, and how different, like how this mouse could solve a maze, and looking at collective intelligence of neurons in a brain of an animal and how this can be synthesized. Another cybernetician like Shannon, Gray Walter, created this really cute turtles, Elmer and Elsie, and he did it in the 1940s. These were one of the earliest artificial animals, digital animals, that actually they were, to some degree, as he described it, passing the mirror test. They were reacting to their image in the mirror and producing some behavior that was irregular. So that was a very interesting moment. There are other examples of unconventional computing that I am interested in that look at molecules of for example, different metals that can, to some degree, present a visual solution to a problem. So this is a work of another British cybernetician, Gordon Pask, that realized chemical computers where you can see filaments of a metal created in a solution that look, to some degree, like a Rorschach test in ink blot. And there were experiments with, like collective intelligence of molecules. Another example of unconventional computing, this is 1949, Bill Phillips, an engineer and scientist who modeled a computer. It's a model of British economy based on liquids. So another example. And well, today there are a lot of scientists, such as, for example, Guy Terola, who has also been a big inspiration for my research and practice, and Radhika Nagpal. They are modeling termites or animals with robots and looking at swarm robotics and how these could be co-opted for computation, for solutions in building, but of course also, and usually this is how all of it starts, for military technologies as drones and military. So yeah, these are, for example, robotic termites building a structure. Other examples of this kind of like distributed computation that looks at neurons in animals and trying to simulate it is the telemetric egg, the way in which scientists are trying to insert a computer inside a bird's egg and then to pretend that this is an egg, and then birds are taking care of it and then they are being surveyed. And more recently, there are examples like xenobots, something that the scientist Michael Levin and his collaborators are developing. So they are using artificial intelligence to model completely from scratch synthetic organisms. So what you see on the top are forms that are modeled and optimized with AI, and at the bottom this is how they are built with living cells. This is an example of an actual cell that they've built out of this, like models of like prediction. This is a very different example of collective intelligence. This is looking at societies and something that really inspires me. This is an object called Lukasa Memory Board, one of the most interesting objects that humanity has produced, in my opinion. So these objects are produced by Luba societies, the Mbudye groups of people within these societies. And it looks a little bit like a circuit board, I would say. This is the way that these societies that live in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, they are encoding, we would say today, various information about this society, from a sort of a map of the territory where they live, to the history of this society, the history of its kings, the legends, but also its technologies and skills that are transmitted from generation to generation. All of it is encoded with all these carvings, colorful beads and holes on one object that is passed on, and then only one person in society at the time knows how to interpret it. But they're so evocative, how you can compress an entire history of a society to one form, essentially a sculpture. But I'm also looking at other forms of collective intelligence and emergence, such as emergence of languages. For example, we often think that languages keep on dying, and some artists have reflected on that. But actually, there are languages that are born as a crossover between dialects, between, for example, there is a language named Laid Walpiri in Australia, in the Lajamanu province, which emerged out of the hybridization between Creole, English, and Walpiri, and a group of young kids that were together in a boarding school in the 80s started speaking this new language that doesn't resemble any of the constituent languages. So now there are a couple thousand of speakers of this new language. I'm also looking at how people collectively organize to take care of forms. Like, this is an experiment that was on Reddit where one user asked people to, whoever was kind of checking into this platform, to decide if they want this plant to be watered today, or if it should be given some nutrients. So every day, people collectively decided, this experiment is called, it's still going on, please take care of my plant. So it's also possible to kill it collectively if it's overwatered, so every day becomes like a democratic experiment to sustain or to kill this living organism. This is a collectively played Pokemon game. This experiment was called Twitch Plays Pokemon, and 150,000 people at any time were playing this game. Altogether, there was over 1 million people that played just one Pokemon. And of course, there are experiments of cybernetics and contemporary technologies that are trying to use collective intelligence and collecting information, especially with AI, to govern and to survey. So the beginnings of cybernetics were some examples that I was showing, thinking about how to simulate the working of an organism, how to simulate a brain of an organism or a human brain. But over the years, it became apparent that cybernetics is nothing else but a system of surveillance and control, and that's how these technologies are used today. But one of the earliest attempts to use this kind of surveillance and collect data about as many, in this case, factories as possible was an experiment called, a program actually, it wasn't an experiment, that happened during the Salvador Allende government in Chile. It was called CyberSyn, and it collected information from the whole, like the entirety of all the factories in Chile that were sent by workers using telex machines still yet. It was in 71 to 73, and kind of collectively govern and take this information into consideration. And then this experiment and this project was shut down by the Pinochet and with the American intervention and the coup. But there are many other experiments and projects that scientists do with collective intelligence, looking at ecosystems and societies. So this, for example, is the James Lovelock Gaia and Daisy World experiments to model an ecosystem with different kinds of organisms and how it will optimize, how some organisms will survive and thrive, others will die, and how we can anticipate it. And another very important development in science is that inspired my work are artificial societies, and artificial societies using also artificial intelligence. So these are agent-based models where computer scientists or computational social scientists are modeling individual citizens with a lot of personality traits to simulate various phenomena, from migrations to pandemics to spreading of a rumor to revolutions. And of course, on the one hand, they are to some degree succeeding, but ultimately such complex phenomena are completely impossible to predict. So I'm interested in this dichotomy of constant attempts to anticipate and predict, especially with AI, and the ultimate impossibility to, for example, predict how people will vote in elections, because such unpredictable factors such as the weather on a given day, or what people had for lunch, or if they had sex the previous night, it can all impact how they're going to vote at the last minute. And these are some examples of how surveillance of crowds is used today, with thermal cameras, with hydrodynamics, with different observations that corporations, governments are using to essentially analyze crowd behavior. And some of these phenomena I am drawing attention to in my monograph book, which is coming out in about 3 weeks from Sternberg Press and MIT Press. So you can see some of these images and alongside my work. And now I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that are inspired by these phenomena. This is one of the earlier projects that in which I was applying collective intelligence. I decided to apply collective intelligence to the production of my sculptures, and I realized that termites, which also perform collective intelligence as they are building their termite mounds, the structures in which they live, that they are blind and they don't notice if I give them sand, which is in various intense colors, crystals, or pieces of gold. They will not notice it. So together with the entomologist Paul Bartunias and other group of entomologists that work at the University of Florida, and they also have an outpost in Namibia, we did some tests, and it turned out that it works, that we can feed them these colorful materials and they will build and they don't notice. So each colony, which consists of termites, which consists of at least 1 million termites, builds a sculpture. So there are artworks built by these societies. But at the same time, it was really interesting for me to look at it because termites are starting to be used by mining corporations in Africa because, perversely, these corporations realize that there actually exists something that is cheaper than slave labor. Termites go down 50 meters underground and they bring up whatever they find there, molecules of gold, of coltan, copper. They bring it up, and after a couple of days or a couple of weeks, you can figure out what is underground. So these mining corporations are now working with entomologists to set up a colony of termites to check what is there without spending $1 or any workers being involved, which is of course very perverse. And for me, it was an interesting model of between the blindness, collective blindness of termites and this exploitative technologies that are now used by mining corporations, that this could be a good model to obviously think about what's happening in societies today, where the entire society became a factory, and we, in a way, we can say we are all blind termites. Our data is being used by corporations, governments. So it was fascinating, and I've since 2014 I've been making these sculptures that termites built for me. And at the end of the process, we just create an incentive for the termites to leave. So we put a little bit of water, nutrients somewhere else, and they all leave over a couple of days. And then we just solidify the sculptures with resin. And I don't influence the shapes, but the entomologist can say very interesting things looking at these shapes. So each form is a little bit different, and they can say something about the society. If the society is collectively curious, collectively lazy, collectively militant, and you can tell by looking at these forms, which I found really fascinating as they operate as superorganisms. So, this is an image of how termites are building from this material. The inside of the termite mounds are also very interesting, and for example, right now at Mudam, I'm showing a couple of these negative casts that we make in Namibia, actually. So we find, in this case, completely abandoned termite mounds. We drill a little hole in the top, and we pour hot zinc that goes in all the corridors, and that's what they produce. That's the negative shapes that we take out after everything is filled in. And they each look as if they were produced by a different species, but in fact, it's all the same species. But each of these forms is produced by a different society that becomes collectively intelligent in a different way. Thinking about how different collective intelligence groups of people or communities or societies form a collective identity, I started collecting signatures and use artificial intelligence to fuse them into one collective signature. And then, so I did it for various communities. In this case, it's the visitors of the Guggenheim Museum, because of how circulating images on social media today is a form of labor. And so we are producing value when we are posting a picture of an artwork that we saw at the Guggenheim or at the Zurich Art Weekend or somewhere else. And, we could somehow say that the famous sentence of Marcel Duchamp, that the viewer completes the artwork, today the viewer completes the value of the artwork by circulating it on social media, which is a form of collective intelligence, of course. So I formed these collective signatures for various communities. This is, for example, all the employees and board members of the Cleveland Museum of Art, as one kind of collective amalgamated social capital or cultural capital. And this is a collective signature of all the scientists that worked at MIT from the beginning of this institution till today. And it's perpetually signing and re-signing. And we collected signatures of academics and of scientists that have ever worked there. Thinking about, of course, how actually science is not just produced by these Nobel Prize winners or not even by the teams of people, but there are many people who are never credited, unpaid interns, students, researchers, and also people working in smaller countries at unknown universities that are just underfunded. And they all very often contribute to the development of the field of an invention. And so this was project that opened at MIT. It's a permanent commission for the MIT List Art Center and the Kendall Square. So if you ever visit MIT campus, you will see that. That's a different kind of collective intelligence, in this case, in relationship with geology and geological forms and our collective footprints. So this is also an example of a work from my exhibition at Mudam, a series of works named Post-Fordite, where I realized that after factories in Detroit and other car factories around the globe started closing, and this production of cars became, one, automated, and two, very often it's moved to Asia, to Africa, where labor is cheaper. All these closed factories, the workers became unemployed, and they started visiting the factories and thinking about what they could scavenge, what they could take away. And by accident, they discovered that on the factory floor, after 100 years of painting cars, of spray painting cars, there were layers of paint that accumulated each time, very thin layer. But because of high temperatures, this paint fossilized, and it started producing these quasi-geological forms that look like stone, like agate stone. So the workers realized that they can cut it, they can polish it, and they can sell it as sort of gems that can be used for jewelry. And so now these fragments of Fordite are circulating around the globe. They are sold at gem auctions, of course, on eBay too. They became a way for these workers to make money. But also it's really interesting because, since car production is now automated, so it's a resource which is finite. There will be no more of this geological forms very soon. And interestingly enough, the workers named this geological formation. They called it Fordite to commemorate Henry Ford. So I named the sculptures Post-Fordite, thinking about today, actually, we all are a global factory of footprints, digital footprints, carbon footprints, and we all became workers. And of course, corporations using AI are mining our labor. So some of the examples of the post-Fordites from Mudam. Another example of how molecules come together in my works to form new unpredictable forms. This also is one of the works at Mudam, but also this is a photograph from Castello di Rivoli. These are forms that are produced using metals that are present in our computers and server farms and our phones. So these are metals such as copper, nickel, iron, gold, silver, and so on. And the salts of these metals, interestingly enough, they were present at the bottom of the ocean just before life on Earth emerged. And they were mixing together and they were producing these absolutely fantastic forms that look like plants. But this, imagine, this is long before life. This is long before most simple primitive cells emerged. So it was interesting for scientists to see how certain shapes of plants were kind of hardwired in non-organic matter. So I started recreating these chemical reactions that happen at the bottom of the ocean using metals from our computers, thinking about how all these elements that are in nature are constantly reorganized into various unstable forms and decaying and forming something new. So I'm mixing these metals extracted from computers. They are metal salts mixed together in a solution, transparent solution of water glass. And these are some close-ups, and these are some paintings that are done with these forms that emerge. These are paintings that I'm doing with liquid crystals, and they are also shown at Mudam. So these paintings are named conversions, and they are based on the reactions of liquid crystals and phase transitions. So they are reactions that happen with them when some temperature change or electrical charge is delivered to the surface. So this is the same painting a few minutes later and a few minutes later. Here is actually a video that shows like this in real time. So they are constantly evolving, as you can see, and each painting is animated by, it's connected to a computer, and it's based on a capture and aggregation of data that I do with artificial intelligence, working with computer scientists. And we are collecting information from different accounts of members of social movements who are talking about changing the world and talking about the future. So we are mining, using sentiment analysis algorithms, the emotions, the feelings expressed in Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram and Facebook posts, and aggregating these emotions to cause actual changes in the molecular materiality of the paintings. So the paintings are perpetually changing in response to changing happening in society. This work is also done with artificial intelligence and looking at collective optimization and how evolution in nature can be compared to evolution done with algorithms of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is, in the way that I approach it, just as a system that was built based on collective intelligence and the exploitation of collective intelligence of the entire society. As you know, our digital footprints, our data are being used by corporations. The photos that we post online, the text, anything that we post in terms of writing and language, it's all used to train the artificial intelligence algorithms so that they become better and better. So actually, what artificial intelligence does, it's a form of optimization. And what I realized that this is a similar process that happens in nature. You know, when nature over time optimizes forms to be more resilient, more adapted. But of course, in nature, it's happening in deep time. And in artificial intelligence, it's accelerated and it happens very fast. So I did a piece called Semiotic Life, which is juxtaposing these two forms of optimization and thinking about how this is related to predicting the future and the impossibility of the ultimate prediction of the future. So this is the green part is a 75-year-old bonsai tree, which is entangled with the blue form. And the blue form is the result of the prediction using tens of thousands of photos of this very tree, of this plant species, so juniper bonsai tree, that we analyzed with artificial intelligence, and we fused together, and we created a prediction of how this species will evolve in the future. This image is presenting how these two forms are entangled and how ultimately the prediction of the future is limiting the present. I'm going to just jump into just three examples of what I'm showing at Mudam, because I know that Olivier has many questions. So this is a cybernetic collective organism that I'm exhibiting, named Alien Internet, that collects information about all the organisms around the globe that are surveyed with technology today. So from birds to whales, dolphins, elephants that are surveyed, that are tracked digitally through apps, through remote sensing, through drones, through chips that are inserted under some animals or bird skin. And we collect all this information together with the computer scientists that I work with, and they are animating this ferrofluid organism that is evolving and kind of operating as a collective body. So all these organisms are contributing to the evolution and changing of forms of this organism that I created using a ferrofluid, which is a substance invented by the NASA in 1963 that hasn't really found like a proper application. This substance is capable of transforming, and I'm controlling it in an electromagnetic field digitally with all the data from animals around the world surveyed with digital technologies. These are some examples of signs that I created was looking at the research of Genevieve von Petzinger, who created a typology of all the signs that appeared in Paleolithic caves. But they are not paintings, they are actually signs. So they are early examples of writing that were by her collected, and she created this typology of 32 signs that reappear in all the caves around the globe. So using artificial intelligence, I analyzed them together with computer scientists and social scientists, and we produced forms of these alternative signs. So it's called adjacent possible. Alternative signs that we could have produced, and maybe we could have built different societies if we invented different signs. These are actually the earliest examples of symbolic communication. So the earliest of these signs that I used in this project are from even 70,000 years ago. This, to just end my presentation, is the teaser of my exhibition at Mudam, my exhibition entitled Risk Landscape, which is all dedicated to the technologies that are trying to predict the future, but how ultimately this prediction is impossible, but how these predictions of the future are actually influencing the present. So this is a site-specific commission that I did for Mudam, where I translated the word future to 14 languages, which have a different cosmology, different spatial imagination of the future. So Western societies imagine the future ahead of us, in front of us. But there are other languages and other cosmologies, other cultures that actually imagine future behind us, above us, or below us, and not in front of us. So I realized it's so fascinating because obviously these societies have very different approach to everything, history, culture, and politics. So I translated the word future to 14 languages that have these other concepts of spatial concepts of the future, and they are all cut out and placed in this glass corridor at Mudam leading to the pavilion. In this cutouts, so these are all the words, for example, behind, Kipa, and so on. The languages that have these other concepts of the future include Aymara, Maori, Yupno, Dairia, which is Moroccan version of Arabic, but also Vietnamese. So there are many languages that have this concept. And you can see this kind of, I was trying to create this situation of how we can see something behind us, and we're looking at the landscape in front of us, and they are kind of hybridized and mixed together. The exhibition at Mudam is kind of concluded with these two pieces. That one is an old piece, Future Anterior, which I did in 2007, together with a clairvoyant who predicted what will happen in the year 2020. And then I created a version of the New York Times from the future that is printed with thermochromic ink, which appears and disappears. And another piece that I'm just gonna here is a lotto machine, the piece entitled Lottocracy, which is looking at radical propositions, radical proposals for politics to replace parliamentary elections as they are organized today with the lotto, which is a very radical concept, but is actually quite interesting given how random are the results of elections where people consciously vote. So this is a working lotto machine that has all the statistics, real statistics of risks and chances of, for example, risk of being struck by lightning or risk of being bitten by a shark, or to risk of meeting your partner on your first date, risk of having twins, or chance of having twins, excuse me, and other, and so. Yes, and other risks and chances. And on the one side, it's printed on the. I hacked this lotto machine working with a lotto company. So one side is the description of a statistic. There are real statistics with real numbers that scientists collected, and on the other side, you see the probability, the chance of this phenomenon happening. And essentially, this project is about how we think that risk is evenly distributed. For example, the COVID pandemic. Theoretically, everybody had the same chance of getting COVID. But in reality, risk is unevenly distributed because, of course, some people living in poorer countries with less protections have different access to chances, or they are most exposed to risks. So I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka, for such a brilliant presentation. Thank you. It was quite fascinating. So there's so much, and we still have a few minutes. So I don't know where to start, but perhaps when I was looking at Alien Internet, this reminded me of this notion from Chris Salter, Alien Agency. And in some ways, this agency that we've been talking about that fascinates you in collective intelligence. Are you looking at this alien agency within the computer, or even within the living, within the natural? Because you also mentioned in the beginning of your presentation these weird life forms that haven't been seen, haven't been expected the way we would expect the living to behave. So where is there this kind of alien form that you're looking at in computers or in the living systems?
Yes, I generally think that we have exhausted a lot of human ways of looking at the world, and this especially individualism, which is the opposite of collective intelligence. And I am trying to look at the world through the point of view of alien, non-human, other intelligences, and think about how this could impact our economy, politics, our systems of governance. To kind of zoom out and like the new piece for Mudam. This piece, by the way, is entitled Future Invention, making a reference to Lothar Baumgarten and how he was thinking of indigenous societies and how we really should study indigenous cosmologies. So I think that, for example, technologies today that are using prediction, like AI, to predict the future, we have to step back and go back and think about language, writing, ancient technologies, and maybe these other cosmologies would, or cosmotechnics, as Hui would say, maybe they would produce very different systems of governance, politics that are less exploitative, more equal.
And even in terms of language, right? This is quite central in your work, this relationship to language. How would you like to tell us a bit more about this notion? Because also it reminded me of this piece that you created in 2008, which was called Ready and Made, where you train these parrots to bark like dogs, actually. So it's been always kind of there, also with Future Interior that you also mentioned at the end of this presentation. With this thermochromic ink disappearing. And of course, when we think about large language models that are at the base of IA and neural networks now, what is have you thought about this line in your work related to languages?
This is a very good question. Thank you, Olivier. So actually, I am related to Ludwig Zamenhof, who was the inventor of the Esperanto language. So synthetic languages have always been very inspiring for my work, and I looked at how languages emerge, like I was mentioning at the beginning of my talk. but also like how people try to invent synthetic languages, various ways of communicating, like the Paleolithic signs that I showed you, and thinking about how, you know, other languages, why certain societies develop certain types of languages in which, for example, there are only certain, very few names for colors. But there are other languages, for example, in Iceland, there are, I think, maybe, you know, 10 times more words to describe snow because of just the fact that the societies, the Inuit societies were surrounded by snow, and this was their Umwelt, this was their environment, and how, you know, how different factors can play into what sort of cosmology, what sort of language system we develop. And of course, you know, the Western languages, Western societies have such a limited way of looking at the world, and such a, yeah, you know, like a very, very narrow cosmology that was driven by individualism, by colonization, exploitation, and obviously other cosmologies and other languages. You know, we can understand different ways of different relationship with the future through these languages. And, you know, one of the most important references from my work is this phenomenon of recursivity in nature, and recursivity that is described in artificial intelligence. So the way in which a system, whether a biological system or a computer algorithm, is able to look at, for example, errors and feed them back, the correction of these errors, feed them back to the system. But there is this kind of misunderstanding, because many people talking about technology, they think that this recursivity in AI is the same as in nature, and it's very different, because in nature the ability to recognize an error as an asset is so different, and it's so much more, let's say, creative, because AI algorithms are unable to recognize something that was already recognized as an error, at the same time consider it as something creative that could lead to the creation of a new form. You know, it's very interesting. This is why, for example, you know, now the large language models are kind of plateauing. All these systems have a problem because all the data that we could have provided have already been exploited. Right now, you know, it's about you know, corporations considering if to use our insurance data, our other private data that was supposedly protected, but how much more can be sold, bought, or you know, illegally accessed to increase the power of these large language models.
Which is exactly the retroactive loop that many have written about, such as Ito Steyer or many other theorists. And so that's the way we, in a way, through this very narrow cosmology, or we've been, in a way, narrowed into this prediction of the future, which is based on past behaviors, right? And how from past behavior, there's this performativity of predictive technologies.
Absolutely. So it's very interesting, you know, that now the technologies are obsessed with the future, but actually we are unable to predict the future because we can only use past experiences. So the you know, all the black swans, whether in terms of climate or results of elections such as Brexit, or, you know, they are extremely rare events that are caused by such complex, unpredictable factors that, you know, that there is this illusion that we can predict with all the AI we're using, that we can predict phenomena like this. But no, actually, we cannot. But at the same time, you know, my exhibition at Mudam is inspired by this whole industry of catastrophe modeling, which is the use of artificial intelligence in finance and in the insurance industry to predict future catastrophes. And actually there are corporations and individuals that make profits from a catastrophe, so a flood, an earthquake that can be predicted. People are betting on it. They are buying the so-called catastrophe bonds. So like millions of people lose their homes or die, and then there is an investor who's making money. And it's especially used by insurance companies that couldn't predict, for example, hurricanes like Katrina or Sandy or Andrew, and they went bankrupt because so many people claimed losses. They couldn't imagine that such a big disaster will happen. So the insurance companies are themselves now being insured. But all of this is to say that now there are corporations that are selling us pieces of the future, these predictions, and it's completely irrelevant if these predictions will come true or not, because even if they don't come true, they are already sold today and somebody's going to make the money today. So one of the projects I realized from Mudam is a series of holograms, which are these predictions of the risk landscape, so the portfolio of risks that are calculated by me with computer scientists for Mudam and for 2 more locations that can be sold today, irregardless of whether they're going to come true or not.
So I would have many more questions, but I don't want to be too selfish. Maybe there are questions in the public. We still have a few minutes. So over there.
So thank you very much for this exposure of this creative collage of ideas generated mostly by people working in the natural scientists. I happen to be a natural scientist myself. And in your discussions, you pointed out many cases of extractivism and the problems with that. And I wonder, from the point of view of an artist who is extracting this information from these natural scientists who take so much time to create this knowledge that you have referred to, I think most artists do not enjoy the success that you enjoy and you have certainly gained with your creativity. But do you feel yourself sometimes that you are extracting kind of extractivism in terms of taking these pieces of knowledge that are so hard to obtain? And have you thought about this and how you can return things to these scientists? I'm a paleontologist. That's some of what I do. And remember when Steven Spielberg came out with Jurassic Park, we were all wondering, okay, he's making all these millions based on knowledge that has taken so much time to gain, but is our field getting back from this? So I'm not trying to be polemic or accuse you of anything. I'm just trying to ask what kinds of thoughts you have had regarding this aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this question. So, because of time constraints, I didn't have a chance to show the images, but maybe I can, I don't know if this is going to allow me, I'm going to just show the visual. Is it possible? Well, maybe not, but there are certain series of works that I've made which are based on redistribution of capital. So not yet among scientists, but thank you for the suggestion. I'll take it into consideration. But for the moment, I redistributed capital among workers and among members of social movements. So, for example, I made works where I asked different workers on Amazon Mechanical Turk to contribute a single line or a selfie. And then it was aggregated into one collective self-portrait of the workers. And then if the work sells, the profits are redistributed among all the workers. So, this is, and I've been developing this series for some years. And similarly, the paintings, the conversions paintings that are actually mining the footprints and the emotions of social movements, a portion of these profits are also redistributed among members of social movements. I forgot to mention that, but thanks for reminding me. And so actually redistribution is a very important, form that I am, I'm using as a part of the artwork. It's a conceptual part. And I'm actually now working on one new series entitled Redistribution that will be specifically about that. So your question is very, spot on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question? I think we are running out of time, unfortunately.
One last quick question, if somebody wants to ask.
Okay. Yeah, one over there.
Yeah, I wonder about the take about thinking in the reverse direction. So essentially, you focus on collective intelligence by many organisms. And to me, looking at LLMs now, it's like getting back to the Renaissance era, where science was not that splintered. And there were people who had the humanities, had the mathematics, music, and so on, in their own mind, like, Blaise Pascal. I wonder, if you see this in the LLMs of today, where you can ask a question across a range of topics, and they're actually being answered fairly competently. To what degree you think about it as such an organism?
Do you mean like asking a question to ChatGPT-3?
Yes, this kind of thing.
Okay, sure. Yeah, the answer is very simple. I would not absolutely not trust ChatGPT-3. It produces a lot of gibberish and a lot of fictions, like it invents stuff. But if you want to use it in a creative way, it's actually more useful. I mean, it has limits, but at least it can kind of reconfigure someone's creative thought process. So, like if I wanted to kind of talk to myself, and I also didn't have time to show this, but I made an artwork called Errorism, which is going to be shown at Centre Pompidou actually starting in September at the exhibition about AI. Where I trained GPT. I trained. I loaded descriptions of my works and all the text that I've written to GPT-2, GPT-3, and GPT-4 because they also behave differently and they produce different results. And I asked it to produce descriptions of new artworks of mine. And it produced quite interesting things that I didn't come up with. So like an alternative version of my work made without me. Technically the way that somebody somewhere in the world could create my work and capitalize on it without me knowing. So for something like this, it's very interesting. But for anything that is like precisely scientific, I would still not trust it, although it's getting better and better, who knows. But as I said, they plateaued these large language models. There is no more currently available, or very few data, because everything is being exploited. All our accounts, emails, everything, all our digital footprints. But to get them better, we need more and more data, more text. So it's interesting what's going to happen. But right now, what I know from the scientists that are doing it, they are already using the results of the GPT-3 to train the large language models. So it's like an Ouroboros eating its own tail. And of course, it becomes repetitive and homogenizes. And the end of it is just total homogenization. So I'm not optimistic about this.
Okay, so I think it can be a nice end word. Thank you very much, Agnieszka. And thank you.
Thank you.